Welcome to the Q&A in the online study circle this September 17th, 2019. Welcome. First of all, before I get into anything else, my apologies to the members of the online study circle that the meditation isn't up yet. Something went wrong there and I'll fix that this evening. A general remark about questions. I've been running the online study circle in German for a little over a year and 4 months or something. And we're basically always swamped with questions, which is lovely. And in the English online study circle, that has yet to happen. So any of you watching this live or at any time later, bear in mind that you can ask me all those questions that you've been wanting to ask. Send them in by mail to matthiasjsj@mac.com or to matthias@matthiasjsj.de. Send in those questions, and if I have too many questions by members to get to questions by non-members, then some will fall off the wagon. But I'll be happy to get into all your questions if time permits. All right, so let me get to the questions that Jana asked. She asked several this month. I've been taught that organ functions, spleen and stomach are related to first depth. Yes, indeed. My question is, how are these two functions related to each other? For example, when spleen energy function is in deficiency, does it lean on stomach function for support, or does it ask for energy to the kidney function, according to the lumbar circle? Let me start by saying that organ function energy is one continuous string of energy, so to speak. It is for our convenience that we have given it 12 names, and those 12 names and 12 aspects and 12 segments are not altogether arbitrary, of course, because the division into 12 segments makes it A, practical for us to speak about these aspects, B, makes sense in that the change of name within the organ function energy happens at very specific places in the body. So you have energy going from the vital center all the way out to a finger or several fingers. It makes sense that this energy of reaching out is a different aspect of still that same bodybuilding and organ building and life building energy that then takes vital energy back into the body, back home, so to speak. And then the energy that's been taken back home is taken from the head through a whole process of processing, through a whole process of digesting that which we have taken home and integrating it and assimilating what we can assimilate and deciding that the rest will have to go. That's the energy that goes down from head to toes, and then as the energy changes direction at the toes and descends back to the vital center, it makes sense that that appears to us as yet another function. It seems legitimate to subdivide one continuous flow of energy into these 12 segments and to do it at those specific places rather than just any old place. So in other words, we have one continuous string of energy that we're dealing with, and that one continuous string of energy will be affected in its sum total if anywhere along the way there is a blockage or a slowing down or a congestion. So that's the background of Jana's question. Organ function energy starts out as so-called lung function energy. Since time allows me, I'll get into a little more detail about this. It's a subject I feel quite passionate about because organ function energy, I find, often gets sort of a very, very limited rep and discussion, because it's often considered as energy that repairs the body. And I don't know, I may have commented on this in an earlier Q&A, but it never hurts to repeat this. So in Mary's textbooks, in Mary Burmeister's textbook 2, where she discusses organ function energy, she makes it very clear that that organ function energy builds the physical body as well as the invisible consciousness, voice, and energy. So this so-called organ function energy builds body aspects, yes indeed, as well as invisible consciousness, voice, and energy. And on a different page, this would be page 3 in your text 2 if you have it, and on page 9 in your text 2, you will find the sentence that states that organ function energy circulates in the body 24 hours a day, building, repairing, and protecting it. So you have the building action, the repairing action, and the protecting action, which I'll go into. I'm sort of in the depth of this subject because I just finished the French version of book 3, the workbook for module 3 of my foundational training. And that book is called Building a Life, and it talks about organ function energy. So it was supposed to just be a simple workbook that accompanies the class, of course having the organ flow circulation patterns and the hand steps to harmonize them. But because organ function energy in all my years, over 25 years of teaching 5-day classes, I noticed time and time again that no matter what we say and no matter what the book says, organ function energy tends to be regarded as the energy that repairs the body. And that is exactly 1/12 of what, if we take Mary's word for it, it does do. It repairs the body, yes, but it builds, protects, and repairs body, consciousness, voice, and energy. And I believe I pointed out that years ago, many years ago, back in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken, I wrote an article for the Main Central newsletter. An article you can, I believe, download from my website for free. If you go to downloads, choose English as language, go to downloads. I believe that text is there, but maybe it isn't. Called 144 Questions on Text 2. And in that article I pointed out that each of the 12 aspects of the organ function energy actually has 12 jobs to take care of, not just the simple job of repairing certain body aspects, but also building those body aspects if they haven't been fully developed, and also protecting them. And that notion of protection is interesting to me, because it's clear that the protecting doesn't happen through an additional action of organ function energy. It's not an additional flow. You don't have lung function energy and then lung protection energy around it somehow. But there seems to be a notion that by inhabiting the organ function, so-called organ function, by inhabiting the energetic pathway that builds certain parts of the body, we can help the body fully develop those aspects if they were not fully developed. We can of course help the body repair those aspects as the blueprint is newly harmonized, and we can also have the only kind of protection that will ever work in life. That is to say, we'll inhabit those parts of the body, those parts of our consciousness, those parts of our voice, or the way we come across, express, vibrate in the world, and energy, inhabit the particular kind of vitality or energy, vital energy, that particular organ function aspect builds, protects, and repairs. So inhabit is the key word. And so when I was writing book 3, I felt a very, very strong need to point that out, and I wrote a number of pages that establish the context for organ function energy and what it is well beyond body repair. And I point out the developmental aspects of it all, etc., etc., etc. And that's coming out in French very, very soon. It's being finished at the printers or at the binders now, and it'll be sent off to France, and I'm very, very happy. Which, by the way, dovetails right into a question that Della sent me by mail. Hi, Della. Della didn't send a question about about the online study circle this time around, but she asked, do I remember correctly that you have your books coming out in English? Yes, you remember correctly, Della, that I announced that would happen this year. And then this year got busier than planned, and busier in different ways than planned, especially this summer had me tend to family matters in a much more intense way than I could have anticipated after my father's passing 2.5 months ago, which I commented on in a newsletter I sent out to everyone who's on that newsletter list. If you're not and would like to be, matthiasjsj.de is the website. Then choose English, then sign up. Anyway, so Della, how soon it will be that the books come out, and whether there too it'll be book 3 that hits the market first, I'm not yet sure of, but you will be sure to be informed both via Facebook and via newsletter, which, as I mentioned, you've hopefully signed up for, and if not, you can do so like right now. Della's also asking, do I anticipate teaching in the US in 2020? Well, that also was the plan, and if visa issues can be figured out, it still is. But it's too early to say that for sure. I hope to be able to confirm that soon, and if it's not in 2020, then it'll have to wait until 2021. But that year at the latest, I do anticipate being back in the United States or Canada. Right. Book 3 coming out in French. Book 3 perhaps coming out in English before the end of the year. If not, then early next year for sure. Organ function energy is one continuous string, which means that lung becoming large intestine, becoming stomach, becoming spleen is where we are with Jana's question. That example is step 4 of 12 down the line. So if something happens in spleen function energy and that gets burdened and blocked, it will create a dam that with time will burden stomach function energy, because it is one set of pipes, so to speak. Organ function energy isn't really to be compared to pipes that get clogged, because then there would be no bypasses possible, etc., etc. But yeah, there is some of that. So spleen, when it's heavily burdened, does end up reducing stomach function's ability to circulate freely, and that backs up into large intestine, and that backs up into lung, and so forth. So sometimes you may think about working with heart function energy, which is what organ function energy is called right after. It's called spleen, right? So the part of life-building energy that takes my being me important enough for me to step up and inhabit life, that part originates in the pit of the stomach actually, but we must remember it does so before a body is even formed. So from there it gathers the juice for being me and for having the room to express energetically and physically. That's why physically it gives us the blueprint for a lung to be, and energetically it gives us the blueprint for always feeling I have the space to be me and breathe life, take it in and breathe it out, and have life extend into me and have myself extend out into the world and into life. That fire is called lung function energy, and that only relates to the part that circulates in the chest. And then once we know that, yes, we have the ability energetically and physically to breathe life and to have the space to express, so voice comes in there, and to have a fiery ability and will to stand up for I'm me and I'm happening in this world now. All of that, voice, consciousness, body, consciousness, voice and energy. Once all of that has been drawn into the body, now it makes sense to create this doorway out of the chest to be and into arms and hands and thereby into action. So, happens. And then whatever we touch and reach and seize and grasp and hold on to out there in life, we take home with that aspect we call the torus aspect of human consciousness and the large intestine aspect of the bodybuilding energy. That then is digested by stomach function energy and leads all the way down to the toes, from where a regenerative and feeling kind of energy comes back to the vital center, only to be called heart function energy once it reaches this sentient and fire center, which is later going to be a physical heart. Now, as heart function energy, it explodes, so to speak. There's fireworks happening. Each spleen energy line divides, or as I prefer to say, explodes, blows up into 5 lines that go in all different directions. Heart function energy, if you mobilize that, if you work with those 10 lines, 5 to the left, 5 to the right, then you are definitely clearing the pathway for the spleen function energy as a circulation pattern to have a place to go. Now, whether heart function was the cause for spleen function to be clogged is uncertain, but it can't hurt to free the pathway so that literally the energetic pathway for spleen function energy is open. I'll get back closer to the camera now that I'm done demoing. And that idea that you're freeing an actual energetic pathway in the body, you are unclogging heart in case that creates a vacuum that actually pulls some of the congestion in the spleen function part of organ function energy. That logic is immediate and it's direct and it is different from the lumbar circle that you referred to. The lumbar circle works with elements, energizing or burdening one another. So elements are basic vitality aspects, so to speak. And that is a different ball game. It's a different cup of tea. So if you find that spleen keeps clogging up again, you may want to look to the lumbar circle and see what organ function energy is most logical to use there. Well, it's a different story. I'm not a great fan of putting too much into the lumbar circle for the simple reason that the lumbar circle was conceived as a tool for us to muse on what else may be in question when the thing we have found obvious didn't do the trick. So that is a situation where you feel, say, spleen in the pulses time and time again. You've done spleen, it helps a bit, but then the congestion comes back. So you keep feeling spleen in the pulses, although you've done it already. So it's quite clear that spleen is not the cause, it's an effect. And then basically what the lumbar circle tells you is, since it doesn't seem to be spleen, it must be one of the other guys. That's all the lumbar circle says for sure. It could be the one standing directly in the way, it could be the one standing in the way 2 down, it could be the one that's supposed to energize, it could be the one that's supposed to energize the energizer and support the function that's having trouble. So in other words, the lumbar circle, when properly understood, in the beginning doesn't say anything about what to prefer. The only thing that Mary did say is, well, you know, if you choose the ones that potentially may be standing in the way, she, in discussing the lumbar circle, called it the to be and the to be, yeah, the one that's coming after spleen and then the one that's coming after that. So from spleen that would be liver next, and then lung. And she said if you work with those two, the ones that are potentially standing in the way, you can never get it wrong, because even if they're not the problem, they will, again, create a vacuum, like I explained in that previous set of explanations. So you're opening space that's literally sort of calling the, in this example, spleen function energy to go ahead and do its job. But at the same time, you're supporting and you're energizing the supporter and the energizer, which would be heart function energy as a supporter and kidney function energy as an energizer. So, Mary, again, the lumbar circle is not a set of recipes. The lumbar circle is a tool to meditate and consider, so let me see, who else is involved? If I am experienced at listening to the pulses, chances are the textures in the pulses, the textures, will tell me which depth is the deeper root cause, and that's what I'll then work with. But the lumbar circle is for those moments when either we don't have that experience yet, or notwithstanding having that experience, we just can't figure it out. So then we look at the fact that, okay, spleen keeps showing up. I don't really know. I know it's not spleen. Spleen must not be the root cause. So it could be any of the others. Do I see any indication in the body, in the pulses, in the person's history, that may, not history, long-term, past history, but in terms of what's going on with them right now in terms of symptoms? Do I see any indication for any of the four others? Yeah? So, because if I do, then Mary's reasoning, look, when in doubt, you can always work with the ones that may be standing in the way, the to be and the to be. That's not a recommendation of something we should always do. That is her clear recommendation when we don't know. So when we can't make up our minds which of the four, or which two out of the four possible culprits is likely to be the culprits, if we still have no clue, if we still, in looking at the fact that, well, since spleen isn't doing the trick, it could be liver or lung or heart or kidney, if we then say, of course, kidney, there was this one thing that they also told me about that actually talks about kidney more than it does about spleen. So then you have an indication, you're not clueless. You don't need to go with the recommendation, left is always right, if you're looking at Starman. Forgive me, those of you who are watching and listening who have no idea what the lumbar circle or Starman are. But it was in the Starman is a little star that happens if you draw in the energizers and the supporters, then you have this 5-pointed star happening, and Starman's left hand and left foot actually point to where the to be and the to be are. All right. So once again, lumbar circle is for us when we are clueless, when we are still clueless. And none of the other four seem any more plausible than spleen itself, than the function that keeps showing up itself. Then you work with those two. Then working with those two will never be wrong, Mary tells us. Okay? So that's usage of the lumbar circle, and as far as I can explain it here. And I guess it's not true to say I'm not a fan of the lumbar circle. I just, when our mind starts making a big fuss about it and thinks that, the very advanced use the lumbar circle, no, the clueless resort to the lumbar circle, which is fine because we all are clueless at times. And it's so wonderful to have a meditative tool to fall back on, right? For those clueless moments. That's what it's for. Johnna's next question. We also know that first depth is related to the earth element, but spleen to the water element and stomach to air. Why is it so? It's a bit confusing for me. Is there an explanation? Confusion is progress, Mary would say. And she didn't say that ironically. It is good to have this kind of confusion come up, because it is progress in the following sense. Of course, all the things that you have heard and that I have quoted you on are information that is given in class, and it is all true at the same time. And to be, again, clueless for a moment and to know, oops, something doesn't quite jive here, is progress in the sense that it has us broaden our horizons, and that's a really good thing. So first depth relates to earth in this sense. The essence of first depth is, I feel I have ground to stand on. I feel that earth and the laws of the universe do carry. They are steady, they are stable, they can be counted on. Earth in that sense. Okay, let me leave it at that. And the two organ function energies, stomach and spleen, go perfectly with that, because the stomach function energy deals all with feeling nourished and being able to process and digest life. So that both gives me a sense that I'm not stuck in my head and I'm not going crazy. I'm actually making it all thanks to my digestion of mind and body and emotions. I am making it all the way down to earth. I'm landing, in this reality, in this moment, where I can then flow with life and feel myself, spleen function energy. And that sense of, that then comes to the solar plexus, and that sense of I'm connected to universal energy supply, universal source as we call it in Jin Shin Jitsu, universal source, seventh depth, universal energy, universal life energy, universal light. That sense of feeling connected and provided for by universal source definitely echoes deeply and profoundly with what we mean when we say earth. Because you see, this is something we need to understand. The elements as we use them are symbols. Yeah? We say first depth relates to earth because we mean by that it relates to feeling you have ground to stand on. It means you feel that you're the fertile soil to what your life is going to produce and bring forth. So, you know, in a sense, when we say first depth is earth, that word is too simplistic and kind of wrong. But when we say first depth relates to earth, and that's how you put it, then we understand we're talking symbols here, not actual fact. Yeah? So in other words, if you find you have a dirt stain on your trousers and there's earth, you know, it's earth, somebody spilled soil on, I don't know, you know, you got an earth stain. Then for you to sit down and brood and say, earth is first depth, I must have a first depth problem that I got this soil on my trousers, that's simply going too far. But it does happen, you know. So earth in that symbolical sense, in that sense of anything that has to do with my sense or lack thereof of being nurtured and held and having firm ground to stand on in body, mind and spirit, is first depth and will be helped by stomach and spleen function energy. Now, in a way, what you're saying is true, and in a sense it isn't. It's not that spleen flow is associated with water and stomach with air. It is that the action of all chest flows, and I'll get back to what those are in a second, is linked to the fire element. The action of all earth signs is linked to finger flows, the action of all finger flows, organ function energy, bursting out from my vital center and reaching out into life and reaching out into the world. We call that a fire impulse. And these chest flows, the lung flow corresponding to Aries, the heart flow corresponding to Leo, and the diaphragm flow corresponding to Sagittarius, they all correspond to fire signs on the personality level. And indeed, the action of me reaching out for life, reaching out into the world, we call that a fire action. And in that sense, lung flow, heart flow, and diaphragm flow being chest flows have a relationship to fire in their action. Similarly, the three flows that follow them, large intestine corresponding to the Taurus aspect of humanness, small intestine corresponding to the Virgo aspect of humanness, and umbilicus corresponding to the Capricorn aspect of humanness, of human consciousness and human action, this basic impulse to take what I have reached out for in life, what I've grabbed and grasped out there in the world, to take that home to my head and my gut. That is an earthy impulse. That is an earthy impulse. Let me take this home. Let me own this for a moment. So that's why those three flows have a connection to earth in that action. And now I'm coming, of course, I'm going through this in order. Now I'm coming to the two specific examples that you asked about, stomach and spleen. So the stomach function energy is one that from the head helps us digest and chew and swallow and digest here and assimilate and then get all the way down to the ground. Bladder function energy from the head all the way to the toes, gallbladder function energy from the head all the way to the toes. These three flows, which begin in the face and are therefore called face flows, these three face flows each have this in common, that they want to take this earthy, let me own this for a moment energy into, but let me not get stuck with owning it. Let me process it. Let me understand it. Let me balance it out. Let me digest it. Let me process, and take it all the way down to earth. That is an airy aspect. That's an aspect of air action. That's an action that aims at clarity and lightness. Clarity of body, mind and spirit. Lightness of body, mind and spirit. Which is why these air sign flows, these flows that correspond to air signs on the personality level, also do correspond to lightness of body. They correspond to building the silhouette of the body. They take heaviness out of my mind, out of my emotions, and out of my body. So they help with physical weight. They help with heaviness of the soul, whether it's full-blown depression or just melancholy or other heaviness. And they deal with heaviness of mind, a full and congested or overactive mind. And the overactive mind would be particularly in the domain of stomach, with its digestive function. So that explains why stomach, but not only stomach, why all face flows have an air connection. And as for water, water in this context stands symbolically for the juices of life, for the flow of life. So all toe flows, spleen, which starts at the big toe, kidney function energy, which starts at the little toe, and liver function energy, which also starts at the big toe. These three function energies that ascend from a toe each and cross at the base, in the general pelvic area, at the base of our body. These three flows that do that have in common that they recharge us with vital juices. So spleen function energy says, here, this is what I feel now. And kidney says, look, there's plenty of energy left over to reinvent myself fully. And then liver says, look, I have what flow it takes to trust life and flow with it. Okay? And in that sense, and in that sense only, not just spleen, but spleen, kidney and liver, all toe flows, relate to a water action. And since time permits, I will go through the 12 organ function journey with that aspect in mind again. And so that'll be in this video. And this video will be up on Facebook, so tell your friends about it if you think they're interested and they missed this particular presentation. So from the vital center, the fiery action of I am me, I'm ready to seize life, to breathe life, to breathe life into me and breathe my existence and action and voice and contribution out into life. That builds this fiery action of me seizing life. Oh, what have we got? The Taurus aspect of personality wanders and takes it all home to the head and the gut. So here we have this, life is rich, life is mine. I have this abundance of experience that I've seized and opportunities that I've seized, and maybe simply objects that I've grasped and acquired somehow, and now they're mine. Now I've taken them home. And we don't want to get stuck, and we won't, in mineness. It's mine, it's mine, it's mine. What is it that's mine? So after large intestine function, energy helps us bite a chunk out of the apple of life. It literally helps us to bite. No, we don't want to get stuck with our teeth clenched. We don't want to get stuck with our teeth clenched, in case you couldn't hear that. We need the next thing, the processing that happens. What is this that I've taken home? What can I do with it? What use is it to me? And all of this digestive, airy action is happening and taking it all the way down to the feet, where now that I have had enough fire to be serious about seizing life and its opportunities, to take what that gives me home and own it, to digest and process that which I have owned and called mine, and now I can feel me and dive into feeling and inhabiting this moment. And that comes up to the heart center, heart to be, where it turns into the fiery aspect of wanting to fill the world with the radiance of my being me. So I fill the world because I now feel who I am. I can now radiate out to the world who I am. I can radiate that out to the world as that Leo aspect of my personality. It's fire again. But it's not the urgent first fire of Aries saying, here I come, this is my life to seize. No, this is the more mature fire. It's not better or worse, it's just, it's gotten to a different place of saying, here I am, the center of the world as far as I'm concerned. Now a harmonious Leo aspect realizes I am the center of the world, as much as you are the center of the world, of your world. I am the center of my world. An unhealed Leo, so to speak, or Leo aspect, would want the world to realize that I am the center of the world. You're not. But the healed Leo-ness of the human being realizes each is the center of the universe, as we understand. And so when we looked at who really is main central energy, we already talked about that honorific center of the universe. Each of us is the honorific center of the universe. So, as I stand at the center of my world, realizing I am the world, a curiosity comes up to make that more earthy and specific and say, what exactly does that mean? What all am I made up of? And that earthy thing, we call a small intestine function energy, that earthy, well, what exactly am I made up of? What exactly is the world that I am the center of, my world made up of? And all those many aspects come together in the most fertile and the most fine-grained kind of way for the Libra aspect of me to then take over and say, in all these many aspects I realize I can now bring into balance, keep into balance, see the value of each of these many, many, many aspects inside and outside, in me and in the world. And as I keep all the many aspects that I and life are made up of in balance, I get down to earth with that, and this turns into the water impulse of completely reinventing myself and life, completely reinventing, renewing, refreshing, regenerating each cell of my body and each layer of my being. And as that reinventing myself dives deep into the being, I'm now ready for the next and final fire impulse, the one that says, wow, as I've just completely renewed and reinvented myself, I can now open up to new horizons. My gaze, my understanding can open up to completely new worlds and new horizons. Wow. And that Sagittarian aspect of wanting to look way beyond the limits of my horizons this far feeds into the but I don't just want to perceive that, I want to use it all. I want to specifically have use of that. I want to connect that into my day-to-day living. And that Capricornian earthy aspect of, let me connect this into every cell of my body and into every fiber of my functioning into the world, then leads to the clarity aspect of the Aquarian aspect called a gallbladder function energy. So now, as the new horizons I've opened up have been bound, connected, tied into my daily living of life and into my body, clarity now arises and I can see through illusions in a way I never used to be able to, and that keeps growing and growing. And from that clarity, that makes me not suffer fools anymore, not be a fool anymore, not be led astray so easily. That clarity of the Aquarian aspect of us is more than just a mind that analyzes. It's a mind that sees through former illusions. It's like once you have realized that the earth spins around the sun and not the other way around, you just can't go back to the old belief, although some people on this earth still do, but that's another story. Gallbladder might help here. And then from the great clarity that gallbladder brings into body, mind and spirit, that final touch of organ function energy comes in, that now I can flow with life and trust it. Now I have smoothness, I have elasticity of feeling, thought and body tissue. So this general lubricant of my being, this I melt into oneness with the flow of life, completes the journey of 12 organ function energy with yet another water or flow function to then feed the next Aries at the next dawn, so to speak, that again says, here I am, all oiled up, thanks to that liver function energy, all ready to go, and sees the next morning. And the more fierily my Aries aspect seizes life and its opportunities, the more solidly my Taurus or large intestine aspect will be able to own them all, and the more solid and in balance all that owning is, the clearer my chewing and swallowing and processing and digesting, and the more deeply I can truly digest and assimilate, the more softly I can feel myself, and the more deeply I feel who I am at core, the more radiantly I will stand there as who I have become. And the more radiantly I stand there, the more clearly I will realize just what all I and life are made up of, and the more clearly and thoroughly the small intestine, Virgo aspect does all of this, the more easily the Libra aspect of me, the bladder function energy, will do its job of saying I'm all of this, not one or the other, not one better than the other, but I'm all of this all of the time. And the more delicate the balance is that aspect brings into my existence, the more fruitful and fertile and prosperous the renewing and reinventing of myself, the regenerating, the creating, the recreating myself, the creativity of my existence. And that creativity that makes me connect to the so far unheard of then leads to that Sagittarius glory of opening to new horizons all the time. And the more widely I open up, the more deeply I'll be able to connect these things into my life, and the more deeply I do connect them into my life, the clearer I get in body, mind and spirit, and from that clarity I can again melt into unison with life and trust it. and flow with it. So that was the long version of an answer to your question, Jana. Thank you for asking that question. And in a way, I guess I'm grateful that I don't have all those many questions today, because it allowed me to get into this whole story. Next question. While doing the feeling exercise for SEL 1, that's this month in the online study circle, so who really is number 1, I noticed that I started moving with my left knee. I heard or read somewhere that Mary said, get up from your bed in the morning on the left foot, something like that. I would like to know if she actually said that or not, and why. Does one flow start in the left supervisor? Well, I certainly didn't hear her say that, and I don't think she would have in quite that way. And it's a very, very human temptation when I have a recommendation to make, kind of put it in Mary's mouth. But the information does come from Mary in its basics. The basics being left relates to the energy of generation and energy of generations, as she put it. Energy of generation, and then she opened a parenthesis, closed the parenthesis. The generative energy, the energy of building, simply happens before the energy of regeneration, of rebuilding. The energy of generation happens before the energy of regeneration. It's just a law of the universe. It's not more important than the other, but it precedes it slightly. So getting out of bed on the left foot, try it. Find out for yourself. I mean, truly, who knows whether any given morning, just because in the great order of things, building precedes rebuilding, building precedes transformation, does that mean that every living day, every living morning, we are in greater need of generative than regenerative? I don't think that such precepts serve us terribly well, but find out. Find out. I have heard it said that when you're out of balance and you're off step, to pause for a moment and then start on the left foot actually sort of gets you off on the right foot, as we say colloquially. So the right foot in that case would be the left foot. I mean, the correct foot, the good foot to start off on would be the left. But, gee, that really brings us into the realm of opinions more than we need to be there. I would ask my body and check it out. But now you know where the information comes from and what to play with. My final question is, I naturally go to sleep with one hand on high 1 and the other on opposite 26. Back to the previous question, because you said that you notice that you start moving with your left knee. Now that's the clear enough indication, and that's the only kind of indication that we need in this case. As long as your left knee wants to start with your left knee. That's where you're at the moment. So that, that is doing what I recommend, that you're playing with what your body tells you, okay? So, now, your question. I naturally go to sleep with one hand on high 1 and the other on the opposite 26. I know this is not a first step of any flow, but it feels comfortable. Can we use in self-help any combination that we like and expect a benefit from? Yes, Jana, yes. I hope that was a clear enough yes. Yes, absolutely. And if you read Mary's self-help books, you will actually find encouragement, plenty of it, in that direction. Remember how in Self-Help Book 1 she says you can custom tailor any of these flows, you can privilege a step that you particularly like, you can use that as your personal custom tailored quickie, you can leave out any step that you find uncomfortable. That already goes in the direction of encouragement to use just whatever combination speaks to you and is beneficial to you in the moment. And then as you read Self-Help Book 2, there's much more encouragement in the same direction, because she doesn't tell you which of the energy locks to prefer, and there's much encouragement to listen to our bodies. And then I believe it is in Self-Help Book 3 where she says that there's always an alternative. Now, of course, she says in knowing fingers and toes, there is always an alternative. But there's simply always an alternative in knowing myself and feeling and listening in. So I would encourage everybody listening to this and watching this to find that out, to find out what holds the bodies like, to observe yourself and find out the things you already hold. And then just make sure you don't get narrow in sticking interpretations on it. Oh, I hold this. It must mean I'm not. Those are the interpretations that really get us trapped. Oh, I keep holding my 19. It must mean I'm not owning my authority. Why limit yourself that way? This is something I enjoy holding. Next thing you might be interested in finding out is, how do I feel when I hold that? And how do I feel as I hold it? In other words, how am I feeling in those moments that make me reach for the 19? And how do I feel when I keep holding the 19? 19 is just an example, right? How do I feel? What feelings and life situations make me reach for this area of my body, for this safety energy lock, for this finger? And once I relax into that, how does holding that area, how does holding that energy lock, how does holding that finger make me feel? Then as you keep observing, as you keep staying in perception rather than analyzing, oh, this must mean, and I think Wayne said, and I think said, and then, instead of going to the I think so-and-so said, or I think Mary wrote, or I think, if you just stay in perception rather than analyzing, you will always, and did I say, you will always find that the thing you keep turning your attention to will change. It will always, but only always, only 100% of the time, change. And that is when you become the artist that Mary so encouraged us to be and become and acknowledge that we are. And then you are connecting on your level. And never mind labeling it big or small. Be doing the same kind or the same kind of research, the same nature of research that Jeremiah was engaged in all his life. That man did not feel into his body and feel into energy flow in his body, so none after him on this planet would ever have to, or would ever dare to, or would ever try to. He wrote down the recommendations and the flows as a generalization for people who did not yet have the same sensitivity he had, but rather than wanting to be the reference who would be quoted and quoted and quoted, and of course with time misquoted and misquoted and misquoted, rather than being that reference that makes people freeze and no longer research for themselves, he, I believe, just like Mary and other people who are alive with their material, would have hoped to inspire in us that same kind of spirit of a researcher, and a curious one, and a live one. So all of us, be reminded to be that investigator, to be the observer, to be in perceptual mind much more than in conceptual mind, observing that conceptual mind freezes things, and perceptual mind always, 100% of the time, helps them flow and keeps them flowing. And with that, I'll come to the close of this. If you are interested in joining the online study circle at this point, you can do so at the link that's coming up in just a second. I've already mentioned signing up for the newsletter, and here comes my encouragement again to any of you listening there. Send me an email to matthias@matthiasjsj.de or matthiasjsj@mac.com with your questions for next month's Q&A, which will be Tuesday, October 15th. If there is a change to that, I'll make sure to keep you posted or to get you informed. on time. So we'll see you on October 15th. Send your questions in the meantime, and if you're interested in joining the online study circle, do so here.